Hey everyone, this is my review for the two-parter episodes in Stargirl Season 3, Episodes 7 and 8, finally titled Infinity Inc. Parts 1 and 2. The description for these episodes say, after Beth makes a major discovery in the gambler's laptop, the team moves forward with a risky plan that affects the entire town of Blue Valley. Jennie returns and seeks help from Courtney. Desperate to avert a major crisis on their hands, Courtney attempts to help a friend navigate their powers. Pat and the Shade must face their worst fears. Infinity Inc. Part 1 was one of my favorite episodes of the whole show, probably my favorite of the season. As much as I've liked or enjoyed other episodes this season, this one reminded me what I loved about Stargirl. It had that season 1 feeling again and the spooky vibes that I love from season 2, and it came out at the perfect time back then for spooky season. While I miss Cindy, I didn't miss Sylvester at all. Ironically, it's the episode named after his team from the comics, but with him out of the picture, we finally got some much needed focus on the JSA kids. All this major development for Rick and Yolanda wouldn't be possible when all we're getting is Sylvester. I love that whole opening scene with them trying to act normal and failing terribly while Beth shut off the power, especially when they prayed to the Pledge of Allegiance. They did a great job showing the scope of the situation all across the city. It's something CW shows struggle with often, and so has Stargirl sometimes, but they've got moments like this. And when Eclipso first arrived, well, the team split up to find the cameras. They all had something distracting them. Rick's anger issues were worse than ever now that the limiter's gone, and Beth was pretty concerned. Yolanda's mom found out she's been lying about working late at the diner and thought she was sleeping around or selling drugs. She wanted the truth and threatened to kick Yolanda out if she didn't tell her. I was actually shocked when she showed up at Courtney's house. I didn't think her mom was serious until then. Then Shade showed up and took Pat and Courtney to help him and Jennie fix up their powers by freeing her brother. When Jennie first used the ring last season, she also turned on Todd's powers and Helix found him. Then she absorbed Eclipso's black residue last year, forming a bond between the Shadowlands and the ring. She needed Todd's help to fix it, but she didn't realize Helix was not hurting Todd, but helping restrain his powers to stop him from destroying the world, by pretty much doing what Eclipso wanted to, I think. This was mostly all set up for part 2, but unlike previous similar episodes like Stars and Stripes part 1, it didn't feel like mostly filler just stalling till part 2, but it was a great episode on its own. And then there's Infinity Inc. part 2. Going into this episode, I was already worried because with Pat and Shade stuck in the Shadowlands, we couldn't fully focus on Helix and the kids. It left me so disappointed. I actually thought this was the worst episode from this whole season at first. It's grown on me a bit now. It works much better watching it right after part 1 instead of waiting a week. Then you don't feel like we barely even spent time with the kids. And that's my main problem. They should have never named these episodes after Infinity Inc. Jade and Obsidian or the Helix Institute for Troubled Children would have been much more fitting names. They did such a great job building up to Infinity Inc. this season. But then other than Jennie and Todd, none of the members from Infinity Inc. were even in part 2. They're teasing a new team at the end with other legacy kids, but again, other than Jennie and Todd, that's not Infinity Inc. But at least this episode looked beautiful, especially Jennie's scenes in the cell and the dream world with Todd. Glenn Winter directed both these episodes, also the pilot, and did such a great job. It's too bad James Robinson was only the writer for part 1. There were still some great scenes. All of the Helix ones were pretty strong. We get a glimpse of Todd's abusive past, like in the comics, a bit of Bones' backstory and motivations, that scene of Courtney and Jennie in the cell, which looks so good, and that beautiful moment of Todd and Jennie finding each other again as kids and then as adults. I just wish there was more of this instead of wasting time on Pat and the Shade. Those scenes have potential, but just not in this episode. They didn't even delve as deep into their fears as they could have, because they weren't there for that long, so the scenes just don't hit as hard as Courtney and Cindy's did last season. I would have liked seeing all of Shade's story with Emily, and I didn't care for Pat's dad, but show us Pat's fears about Mike's feelings about him. I feel like this whole storyline was just there to set up Mike reuniting with his mom in the series finale, but they could have set that up in any other way, like actually giving Mike a storyline, then they can use this screen time for more of Mr. Bones and Infinity Inc. Now, Mr. Bones looked amazing. I'm not a huge fan of the pink skull, that's why I always edit him to have a white one instead, but for what they're going for, this was perfect. They fixed up the skull design from last season and they had great CGI. I was just disappointed we didn't get much of him after all that build up, and all we got from the Helix 6 were cameos. I ended up liking the twist villain, but until then, I was feeling they just wasted Mr. Bones. After part 1, it was obvious that Bones wasn't the villain, and when they did reveal it, it didn't really make sense that Courtney thought he was the villain, because she never saw him being fascinated that the heroes and villains were living together, or saying he was gonna take a trip to Nebraska, which he never took, unless that's where they learned all about them. And yeah, he talked to her through a camera, but she's in his home. Jeff Johns has now confirmed these were 2 backdoor pilots for an Infinity Inc. spinoff they were planning, which was pretty obvious. It was probably gonna adapt the Infinity Inc. rivalry with the Helix 6 between Jennie's new team and the one that Mr. Bones was gonna form, and that's probably where we could have gotten answers about Nurse Love, because it still wasn't clear if she's Dr. Love from the comics or not. Mr. Bones said Nurse Love saved him from the ones experimenting on his mother, but Dr. Love was the one behind those experiments in the comics, unless she's his wife who turned against him, or it would have been their big twist that she's the one who did this to them, and that's what brings the 2 teams together. But I don't know, because right now she seems genuinely nice. Like the way she looked at Todd, she was so concerned about him, but then again, he wouldn't be one of her experiments, so maybe that's why. But right now, it would have been impossible to do Mr. Bones' whole redemption arc from the comics, cause he literally did nothing wrong. Courtney didn't agree with his methods and got him to consider another way, but his intentions were never wrong. Going off what they did here, if he would have actually been the main antagonist of this season, they could have went further further into their opposite situations and their differing ideologies to build tension between him and Courtney. They had a pretty great setup already because, like Bones said, Courtney can put the staff down whenever she'd like and live a normal life, but that's not possible for the Helix kids. Since season 2, Courtney's whole story has been about struggling to find a life outside of Stargirl, and she kinda realized she doesn't need the staff to be a hero throughout these 2 episodes, but again, for Helix kids, that's not a choice. Mr. Bones would probably kill to have the life that Courtney's been taking for granted this whole time, and this would have made for such a great rivalry. It also contrasts with Rick, who is choosing to live like Helix and not be able to turn off his powers. Meanwhile, Courtney is trying to teach Cameron to use his powers and still lead a normal life, and by the end of this episode, Jennie and Todd are kinda in the same situation as Cameron. As long as they control their emotions, they're pretty much normal and can shut off their powers whenever they want, but it's not the same for someone like Bones and Carcharro, who are more like the Morlocks from Marvel, with such extreme mutations that society is never gonna accept them, which justifies Bones' fears and his separatist ideology. I guess that kinda made him misguided, cause not all of these metas shared his experience, but now thanks to her father's experiments, Cindy is on her way to joining that same group as Mr. Bones and Cacharro, and would have found someone to relate to with them. Then maybe after Courtney made Bones change his mind about isolation and try and integrate into the normal world, Helix were met with fear and attacked, and that would have turned him against humanity, a bit like Magneto or Namor. Maybe a Helix member was killed, so then Bones blames Courtney and the JSA for making him think it was safe to reveal themselves, leading to them fighting and then him wanting to get revenge on Blue Valley. That sorta makes him another justified but really misguided antagonist like season 1 Jordan, rather than pure evil like Eclipso. Then if the Helix 6 learned that Nurse Love made them this way and she was working with Jordan who killed the gambler, that would have brought the JSA and Helix together, and fighting alongside these heroes who accept them convinces Mr. Bones to give Integration another chance. I just wish they would have done more to wrap up these stories since they knew that was likely gonna be the last season. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for similar content. Leave your thoughts on the video and episode in the comments below. Thanks for watching, happy holidays, have a great day.